Hello again and welcome. We are on the ground here in beautiful Sonoma County, Northern California, at Orbix's KSTS, Charles M. Schultz Santa Rosa Airport. The guy there in the yellow vest and the black pants, waving his arms around there, is of course the great conductor Leonard Bernstein. I kid, naturally, but I'm not kidding about this. We are about to embark not just on a flight, but on the first leg of a journey. You and I, and the mighty Dash down there. The reason is simple enough. You see the letters there on the side? Those letters are Pan Am, and you see the insignia on the tail. That there is a globe. And the way I look at it, we need to do something to live up to Pan Am's perhaps tarnished, perhaps faded, but never quite dead reputation for spanning the globe. So what we're going to do, partly as a thank you to everyone who subscribed, and there are now 200 of you out there, we are going to head out across the United States, starting first in the Rockies, then across the plains and into the Great Lakes, and up into Canada. And then we are going to do this. We are going to head from Montreal, cross the Atlantic Ocean, and from there we are going to make our way around the Earth. Now, there are certain limitations, logo notwithstanding, and mightiness notwithstanding, and that is that the mighty Dash cannot, of course, span oceans in a single leap, so what we're going to do is take a rather old-fashioned route that used to be taken by planes probably dating back to the DC-3 to get across the ocean, and so we're going to go first to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and then we are going to go to Gander in Newfoundland. From there we'll go to Greenland, and the place I've chosen is a beautiful airfield on a fjord called Nook, which has got a rather challenging approach onto a short runway, and it is going to be chilly and icy and majestic in the wintertime. From there we'll go to Keflavik, Iceland, and if I don't butcher the English language any more than that, we'll head to Shannon, Ireland, and from there probably Great Britain, France, and you know what I'm going to do is I will leave it open to the viewers. So what I want everybody to do is, in each installment, let me know where you'd like to go next, keeping in mind that I'd like to go someplace that I can get a good-looking airport for, and that isn't always everywhere. And keeping in mind, of course, the limitations of the mighty Dash when it comes to field length and things like that. But I'm pretty much open. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is because, in fact, I've learned an awful lot from viewers. I've gotten plenty of really good advice, great tips. And together, you and I are going to learn how to do transoceanic navigation. So high-frequency navigation and equal time points and things like that. We're going to sort of figure out on the fly, as it were. But that's why I'm glad we've got a bit of a cross-country flight ahead of us. First stop is going to be, if I can just recall it here, is going to be Lake Tahoe, which is another Orbix airport, and it's a beauty. We're going to fly to Reno and then hook a right and come down over the lake. And as I've been able to suss out from the weather right now, it is not bad at the airfield itself, but we should be going through some significant snow and convective activity, so it should be sporty. I've already entered the route, and it's pretty straightforward. We're going to fly out of KSTS on runway 32. We're going to fly in a departure procedure called the Charlie 4, named after Charlie Brown, because of course Charles M. Schulz was the creator of the Peanuts. And of course this time of year, Charlie Brown Christmas is on, and everybody sort of sighs and remembers a better time. I'm not sure it was, just from my hazy memory, necessarily a better time when Charlie Brown Christmas came out, because it was the height of the Vietnam War and the Cold War, and everybody was threatening to blow everybody else up, and there was the Palestine Liberation Organization making its presence felt, and they were hijacking planes left and right, and so I tend to think that the golden age never was, and the present is pretty much okay by me. Besides, we've got computers and Prepared and Active Sky Next and Orbix and of course Majestic and the Mighty Dash. And we've got GPS navigation in real life, and got a chance every now and again to go up in a friend's aerobatic Belanca decathlon and fly real VFR flights and real tail dragger, so life is not exactly bad. And today is just fine with me, but we're going to fly the Charlie 4, and of course we're going to fly over the waypoint Snoopy, named after the world's greatest canine aviator, who managed, with nothing more than a pair of goggles, a leather helmet, and a flying doghouse, to take on the feared and loathed Red Baron and vanquish him. So we're in pretty good company today. Anyway, so what we'll do is we'll get ourselves buttoned up here. And as I said, already loaded a flight plan, but you notice that it's loaded on FMS1. It's not loaded on FMS2. The way you change that is you go to Data and Exfil, and you cross-fill your flight plan, and you watch it go from left to right. And cross-fill our fuel and watch that go from left to right. And now, as you can see, as if by magic, our FMSs are synced up. So, our cruising altitude is going to be flight level 190. We are going to take a look at our weather here and see that it's 2991, and the winds are negligible, so we'll set 2991, being sure, of course, to check our field elevation as soon as we finish setting our altimeter, and we'll note that it's 130 feet, which is what it should be. I've already set our V-speeds. Let me just briefly set our decision height back to an ILS into here in case we have to come back. And that is set. Our runway heading is set already, and that will also remind us as we taxi out and turn onto the active runway that we're not turning onto the wrong runway. Set our auto feather and started testing. Our APU is on at the moment. So what we will do is we'll set our anti-collision light to red, and we will check to see that our ignition switches are in the normal position, and they are, and that our bus tie is tied. What we'll do is we'll shut off the bleed air, even though it automatically shuts off when you run through the start procedure, so you don't really, strictly speaking, have to. What we will do, though, is we'll make sure that our steering is locked so that we can get a push. We're going to push nose right. And let us see what else there is to see at the moment. I think we're looking good, so what we'll do is we'll call for a push. It's a little bit awkward because you sort of have to manage it through the FMS. You do that by hitting Data and Services and push nose right, but actually before we do that we will check our gear pins to make sure they're stowed because if we don't see these 3 flags for the 3 gear pins sitting in the basket here, it means they are still in our landing gear, and if they still are in our landing gear, it means that we will not be able to retract our gear, and that is very embarrassing. We can either fly to our destination with gear down, or we can come back and land and open the door and shut the engines off and pull the pins. And so that is a new feature of the Majestic Professional, is that it models that, and it will randomly bite you with that every 10th flight or so. It will not stow the pins for you, and if you don't check them, you'll be hosed. So, having checked, now we'll start our pushback.
Ground, we are ready for pushback.
We are ready now, please release parking brake.
Parking brake released. Flip this to 2.
Parking brakes released.
Pushing back now, you're clear to start the engine number 2.
We hit start, come down here, move our condition lever up to start feather, and not only do we monitor our push, our start, but we also monitor our push. So we look out the window and make sure we're not getting pushed into anything. And so far we're not, but I think that's as far as I'm going to, you'll forgive me, push our luck.
Pushback complete, leave, set the parking brake.
And so we'll set the brake.
Parking brake set. Can we get clearance at number 1?
The tow is free and clear of nose gear. Clear to start the engine number 1.
And thank you. We'll thank the nice German. And then we will hit our start switch again and again. Deal with a wandering power lever there. I've got a pair of Cytec throttle quads handling this and this and this and this. And I will say without any fear of contradiction from anybody, I'm sure, that they really, really suck. They are cheap, they're plastic, they have noisy pots that go bad after about 3.5 weeks. I cannot wait to get rid of them. I would not recommend them to anyone, except they're really the only affordable solution so that you can have working throttles and condition levers and mixture controls without spending a ton of money. So I've been saving up, and I'm going to get something, and I'm not sure what. I'm kind of open to recommendations. So if anybody has any ideas, I'd be glad to listen. But in the meantime, let's turn the steering on. And now that our engines are running, we will turn off our gens here, turn off our APU there. We will move our bleeds to min and turn our bus tie off. And we will slide our condition levers all the way forward. And what you'll see happen here is the AC gen warning lights go out, because now we're going fast enough to turn the gens. Turn our bleeds back on. And now, again, a dark panel is a good panel here. Turn our anti-collision lights on, and our taxi lights on, and our logo light on. And you'll see that it is warning that we do not have our heats on, and our pitot and standby pitot heats should always be on. This isn't one of those planes where you turn them on and you turn them off. They should always be on, which is why they always give you a caution when they're not on. The other thing we'll do is we'll turn our windshield heats on, and that's mainly for bird protection. It makes, of course it melts the ice, but the other thing it does is that it makes the windshield just a bit more resilient in case we happen to come in contact with a flock of geese or even a flock of seagulls. But I don't think we're going to be hitting any 1980s hairbands. So anyway, let's turn on our auxiliary fuel pumps and our standby hydraulics. checking to make sure that the system comes up to strength. The other thing we'll do is we'll turn on our number 3 isolation valve, and that will shoot the number 3 hydraulic system up, and it comes up, and the caution comes on, and now we will close that and let it drift back down. We'll set our takeoff flaps to 10, and we will head off towards runway 32. It's going to be a short little hop. Then I got to do some Christmas shopping. And we're going to taxi, trying to keep ourselves in our propeller ground range, which will provide us both acceleration and braking as we pull back. You hear the props rush like that. That's them shifting into flatter and flatter, and then finally slightly reversed beta range. We'll try and be good ramp citizens and follow all the lines as we taxi here. At this point in real life, we would have talked to either ground at a bigger airport or tower and gotten taxi instructions out to the active, which in our case is straight ahead and then a little bit of a chicane to the right. As I'm taxiing, I'm monitoring our ground speed, which you can see right over here. This airplane can taxi pretty quickly if you really want to. It can go Southwest Airlines style if you've ever flown Southwest and kind of felt yourself hustling in towards the gate on arrival. You can taxi probably up to about 25 knots, and they say 15 or less when you're turning a certain number of degrees or more. And if you move the power levers too far forward, you'll hear a click, and then that 1 and 2 in the ground range annunciator over there right above the PFD will extinguish. You'll see. See? Now we're in flight range, and we want to get back into ground range. I've got the high precision control set up in the professional. That's a new feature as well in case you're new to the pro version. You have to enable it in the aircraft INI file, and then you have to figure out and identify what your joystick number is, and you have to edit the lines that say joystick X or whatever, and you have to tell it what joystick is what. But once you do, you get these unbelievably smooth and precise controls as we look over there and see nobody's coming. And we look over there and see nobody's coming. We'll take the runway. We'll set our parking brake. Used to be position and hold, and now it is under the international guidelines. It is now line up and wait. And they did that, I presume, to standardize the language, and so it couldn't be mistaken with anything like permission to roll or anything weird, because it really can only mean one thing. It can only mean get yourself lined up and wait for takeoff clearance, so there's no ambiguity. We'll check our runway heading. It is 321, that is correct. We'll take off our control lock. We will turn on our approach lights, check that our bleeds are at min, check to see that our takeoff elevator trim is set, and it is. I've cranked in 10 notches of right rudder trim because the plane tends to pull to the left. We are in go-around mode, and actually let us first go into a heading mode because we're going to pretend we're getting vectored here, because the Charlie 4 SID is basically just this heading until 530 feet and then manual, which is presuming vectors. And as you can see straight ahead, there's no real terrain, but we're going to wait until we get up to a couple thousand feet, and then we will pretend we're getting vectored around back this way to our filed flight plan. So with that, I think you know the drill. We're going to look for 80 knots. Well, first we're going to set takeoff power, which is NTOP, or 90%. You can override that and make it whatever you want, but that is all we need. And then we're going to look for 80, and at that point, if we had a first officer, he or she would check his or her PFD and make sure that we're getting identical airspeed indications. And the reason for that is because if we're not, there's a good reason something is funky, and we would stop the proceedings right there. And then our next speed would be V1. Last possible moment we could stop this thing. And our V-rotate is one and the same, and our V2 is 1 knot above it. When we rotate, we'll pull up at about 3 degrees per second to 10 degrees, and we'll fly that pitch. And we will fly this lateral path. And I think that's about it. So let us start our journey around the world right now. Start our clock. Check for stable power. Release our brakes. Advance to our requested power. Maintain the center line. Look for 80. And 80 knots. And our first officer's checked. Looking for 124 or the end of the runway, whichever comes first. Alright, there's V1. And rotate. And up to... And look at how precise those controls are. I'm just using the absolute gear up, lightest of touches, and it just flies like a dream. And we are above our flap speed, so up we go. And we are coming up on our acceleration altitude, so we'll let the nose come down. Bring the props back. And we will get us back on runway heading as we just got hit by a little gust right there. See if I can get us steadied out a bit. Feel us getting bounced around there? Alright, we'll put ourselves in IAS mode. And we'll drop in the autopilot. Fly that heading. And while that's going on, let's just turn off our pumps and our auto feather and spin ourselves around and get ourselves on course for Tahoe. And we can actually increase our climb by decreasing our IAS. Put ourselves on an intercept with our course right there. Pretend we're air traffic control. And start our trip to the Sacramento VOR, where we will pick up the J32 airway. Just gonna tweak our rudder trim a little bit. And we've been cleared up to flight level 190. So around we'll go. And the other thing we'll do is clear ourselves direct to Sacramento, so we do that by hitting our DTO for direct to and choose 4 for Sacramento. And now we can hit nav and it will turn us onto our new course, onto our new track. These displays right here basically show us ground track, cross track error, and it shows 0, which means we're right on track. That reflects this number right here. RNP is the required navigational performance to be able to fly this route, and it's 2.8 miles deviation on either side. Our ANP is our absolute navigational performance, which is the performance we're actually keeping, which is about 1.5 of a mile, or 15/100ths of a mile. And the way it calculates this is by looking at all the GPS satellites and ground stations and cross-checking and correlating them. This is what allows us to do those funky curving GPS approaches, is our ANP versus our RNP. And if you look at a chart and it says RNP 0.1 required, you have to make sure that you're doing 0.1 or you can't legally fly it, because it can't really guarantee that it's going to keep you safe from any terrain. So we'll set our heading bug to our heading, and this little magenta triangle is our actual track. And that comes in handy when you're flying using blue needles and you're flying a VOR using an RMI needle. What you don't want to do is put, if you merely put your plane's heading so that the needle of the station or the NDB beacon always points to this index, you'll always be drifting with the wind. However, if you place that needle, if you turn the plane so that the needle is always over the magenta triangle, it will constantly be correcting for your wind. It will be telling you what your track is, and if your pointer is always on this needle, you will fly the track you've selected, which is kind of cool. Alright, our next milestone is 18,000 feet, at which point we'll switch over to standard altimeter, which is not very different from current altimeter, and we'll bring our props back when we get up to cruise. Now that we're established, I was going to say I can turn our fasten seatbelt signs off, but I never turned them on, so fix that. Give ourselves a little spanking for not following our checklist. And we're coming up shortly, not too far from here, on Sacramento. About 45 miles away, and it's over the first range of mountains here. And that's, of course, the first range of mountains before we get into the big hills on the way into Lake Tahoe. And I don't know if you can hear it over my yammering or the airplane, but I'm coming to you from New York, from an apartment in New York, and being an apartment in New York, you have all kinds of interesting neighbors, and my neighbor happens to be the voice coach for the Metropolitan Opera, as in the Metropolitan Opera. And so at any given moment, there will either be a fat lady or a fat man next door to me bellowing his or her lungs out to Verdi or Puccini or Wagner or Mozart. And I have to say, it puts me in an awkward position, because I come from a family of musicians and music teachers and music lovers, and I certainly am a music lover, and I grew up around great music, and I appreciate all kinds of music. I like jazz, and I like hip-hop, and I like pop and rock, and I like Sinatra and Billie Holiday and all the greats and show tunes even, for goodness sake. But maybe this is my weakness. Maybe it's my inherent good taste. Maybe I just haven't learned enough. But I absolutely hate opera. And I love the human voice. I just don't like the human voice doing that. It just has always seemed forced to me. And of course, that leads me to my current situation. I am next door to opera singers every single day, starting about 9 o'clock, especially when the opera is in season. And so I have to listen to this all the time. And on the one hand, it's a form of singing that I just can't wrap my head around, and it's probably my own failing, and we should probably fly into Italy on our round-the-world flight here, so just to try and get it out of my system. But as much as I can't stand it, I'm in a weird situation because I am listening every single day, not to opera singers, which I hate, or not to opera, which I hate, but to some of the finest opera singers who have ever lived. So here I am in a situation where probably any other person who has even a remote liking of opera would envy me intensely. And I can't even legitimately hate it, because here I am hating on like some of the best in the world, and I mean it. You know, before, the Barber of Seville or Pagliacci or whatever plays, before it opens up, a month or two before, I get to hear the greatest opera singers on earth get even better thanks to my neighbor's coaching. So, I mean, I shouldn't be in a position to complain, but I am, because it's opera. Anyway. We're encountering some icing, so we'll turn on our boots and open up our engine intake doors and turn on our engine intake heaters. You probably won't even hear it, and maybe if the singing gets loud and the flying gets quiet, I'll just drag the mic out in the hallway and give you a sample. For opera lovers who are among my viewers, probably, you will find it amazing. For me, it's just the thing that wakes me up in the morning. Alright, so we're in the cruise. Our props are at 850. Our anti-ice is on. And let us turn on our radar here and see if there's anything to see. Turn that on, and I'm going to go over to my first officer's display here, and we will set her display to show weather instead of terrain. And it looks like we have got some reason it thinks our radar is on standby, and it is not. Let me just cycle that. Okay, there. Our weather radar is on. Let me just point it at the ground a little bit more so we can see what, if anything, there is to see. Here's the tilt control. Let's just tilt it down about 5 degrees and see if it's painting anything. Alright, so far so good. We got nothing at the moment, and that's fine, because the radar does not detect clouds. It detects moisture in clouds, or moisture out of clouds. And it also detects changes in the relative speed of that moisture, which lets us figure out convection. I think it's got a Doppler function. The Doppler effect, by the way, is frequency change with respect to relative velocity. Basically, as something is rushing towards you, its frequency increases. If you bounce radio or any microwaves off of it. And did I say frequency? I meant wavelength. And as you're moving away, wavelength gets stretched out, and that's how Doppler radar measures wind. And that's Sacramento down there, so we're looking good. What we'll do is we'll quickly brief our approach and we'll set up our descent because it's a very short flight. And I will kill that AWOS there. But what we will do is we will check on our weather conditions in Tahoe. So do that by pulling up our radio and setting it to 122025 like so.
Kilo Tango Victor Lima Airport information Papa 1808 Zulu weather wind 178 at 4 visibility 10 sky condition 2600 scattered 3400 scattered temperature -1 dew point -4 altimeter 2974 advice on initial contact. You have information Papa Kilo Tango Victor Lima Airport information Papa 1808 Zulu weather wind 1.
So if we're calling in to approach or tower, we would say Clipper 125 inbound. Well, we would say flight level 190 inbound KTVL with Papa, and we put our altimeter in our standby because we're still working here on standard, so use that as a scratch pad. The other thing we'll do is we will brief our approach and we will check our field elevation, set that, and get everything else set up and ready to go. So our approach is going to take us from Reno southeast to Hetry, and you can see we're coming in over the lake here, and we have a 900-foot minimum, or actually 7160 is our MDA. I'm going to set a radar altitude of 900 for our decision height, even though it doesn't really have a decision height. The reason I'm doing it is because it's the only way the airplane will enunciate, and we're turning right over the Sacramento airport right there. And there is suburban Sacramento, and this is the Sacramento River. And so let us check. So touchdown zone elevation is 6254, and runway length is 7017. So we'll set 6254 for our field elevation, or touchdown zone elevation. And for our runway length, it is 70. Let's try that again. Runway length 7017. Without this information, the HUD really can't give you an accurate picture of your approach. The other thing we'll do is we will make sure our glide path is standard, and I don't see any indication that it is not, so we don't have to change anything in the HUD, and that should cover that. You'll excuse the small stutters I've got. I'm experimenting with graphic settings here. As you know, we're flying in 4K resolution, which is great. I'm on a 32-inch 4K monitor, which is just about the right balance between field of view and not getting too blocky or chunky with screen displays or anything else, not needing much anti-aliasing. And we're flying, of course, in the Majestic Dash, and that's usually pretty frame rate friendly, but it's got a whole bunch of different settings you can use to tweak which CPU it runs on, and I'm just experimenting with those. Ideally, you probably shouldn't have to do anything, and I probably shouldn't, but I'm just dinking around and seeing whether I can find the best balance between frame rates and smoothness and amount of detail displayed. So let's look and see. Right now we're at about well, we're at a really chunky sort of frame rate. We're going from a low of about 40-39 to about 50 something, and that is very variable. And hey, we just had one of our many odd prop problems I've had with the dash lately. And as you see right there, engine number 2 just oversped briefly, and the props are now pinned to their max. And if we look up here, you'll see that the number 2 prop electronic controller failed, and this happens sometimes. And so the first way to get around it is to see if we can power back and reset it that way. And that should do it. I'm going to move our condition lever to end top, and then I'm going to bring it back, and I'm going to hit MCR, clear our caution, and see if we can move our power lever back and have this come back down to normal. I'm going to cycle our condition lever again, and it is not going to do it. So what we do is we turn on our PTU and our standby, and we feather first, and then we shut down our number 2 engine. And we'll turn our bus tie on. We are still getting pressurization, and we're still getting AC. I'll trim the aircraft a little bit, and we will make sure that we are flying straight and level, maintaining altitude, maintaining course. And now that about 30 seconds have elapsed to cool down the engine, we will shut her off. And that's my SciTech quadrant. I'm guessing that the reason why I'm screwing up my engines is because my power levers, my SciTech quad, burps, and it inputs something that doesn't make sense to the airplane, and so the controller fails. But we'll see. Again, the dash can fly just fine on one engine. It can climb just fine on one engine, but we're not going to worry about that. So what we'll do is we'll go through our startup procedure now. Turn our engine start selector to 2, and we will hit start, come back downstairs, turn our lever to start feather, and you see we're now at max continuous power here instead of max cruise. That's to make up for the shortage of power. We're just monitoring our start here. We're also keeping our eye on temps and pressures here, making sure nothing overspeeds, nothing causes us any concern for our remaining good engine. And now we will advance our condition lever, watch our props come up, and if I'm not mistaken, they will come up to max. And we'll let everything stabilize momentarily. Keep another eye on our altitude, and now you see how we have to retrim because now we've got that prop spinning. And what we'll do is we will bring our prop back to max cruise, and we will bring this one up, and we will bring this one to max cruise as well. And then we'll first try punching max cruise here, and it will not do the trick. And I find that the only way to get us back on track is to briefly pull our power to flight idle, and then hit max cruise, and as if by magic everything gets reset. I don't know if this is the official procedure, but I found that it works. And now, having done that, let us very quickly program in our VNAV descent, because we're getting close to the top of descent. VNAV, and let's see, we want to go to Hetry. No, I'm sorry, Obave. That's our first constraint. Obave at 3,000, at 11,000. There we go. And that is perfect. And we're 13 minutes away, so we're good. Go to nav. We're not within range to arm our approach yet, which is fine. And you'll see that is our approach. And you know what let's do? Let's save us a little time. Let's go direct Hetry. So we're going to skip flying all the way out to Reno, save ourselves some fuel, a little bit of time. We've been cleared direct to Hetry, so you hit 7, and now you see it says we're coming up on our top of descent. So it recalculated our TOD, which is great. Alright, so our initial constraint is 11, so we have to set 11 on our AFCS, and it is set, and we can put ourselves in VNAV descent mode, and it will be armed, ready to go. And now I'm just going to quickly check our field elevation, which again is 6254, which means that our field elevation has to be set to, our landing altitude has to be set to about 6,700 feet here, so we're depressurized by the time we're on the ground, and that is set. Alright, and we've checked our weather, and it is Papa, and we'll check it again in a second. But first we'll get established in our descent, and you can see there it is. That's the lake over there. I'll turn our standbys off now, and turn our bus tie off as well. And now you can see, just check our icing here. I think I've mentioned this before, but you can check for icing by, of course, by looking at your wings. But in the real world you don't have that luxury. Well, you can sort of peer out this window and you can see your leading edges, but not your tail surfaces. But the other useful proxy for icing is to look at this little spigot right here, this little stub, because that is where icing builds up first. So down we go into our descent, pull our power back, and because we are interested in a little bit of time saving here, we're going to just do it practically in the red, practically on the barber pole there. So we're going to fly like a sports car, and in a minute we're going to be through 18,000. So what we'll do is we will set our altimeter to 2974, and let's do that now. And we will also set our V-speeds. I've got a little tool to do that. It's a Lua script, which runs in conjunction with the FSU IPC. Okay, there we are, right on the barber pole. Bring our power back ever so slightly. But we're just barreling on into town here. That's the lake down there. going to swoop down onto it. And now, since we're in our descent in earnest, turn our pumps on and our bleeds on. We'll seat the passengers, and we'll take care of this early because we're actually 10,000 feet above the ground now. And at the moment, we don't need any ice protection. I'm guessing we will in a second. We will cross-check our descent. And I am guessing it is not offering us to arm the approach because we've edited our approach. And we've edited the approach by putting in this waypoint here. So let's just take it out and see if it lets us arm the approach. I will bet you it will. Huh. It doesn't. We are maybe not within range yet. But what I'll do here is I'll scale up our display here. And we're just skirting the edge of the lake. And we do have ice now, so let's turn on our boots, because the last thing you want to do is build up a load of ice right as you are maneuvering for landing, because bad things will happen. The clouds are Rex soft clouds, and the weather is active sky next, and it is stupendous. I'm just going to quickly check our frame rates here, and we're at about 59. That's pretty darn good. Alright, so we're going to come up on Hetry and let us start to slow now. I don't want to get too nuts here. We'll also set up for a reduced noise profile landing. You do that by hitting that button, sliding the levers forward. What it does is it lets you land at 850, but if you should go around, it automatically bumps them back up to max, so you don't have to worry about it. And we are how far? We are 6 from Obave, and we have to come down 2,000 feet, and we will. I'm just going to bring us back to flight idle here. Give us more room on the descent. And that is gorgeous Lake Tahoe. Other thing I'll do is, it's still not offering to arm our approach. We may have to fly this as an overlay. Not sure why it's not doing that. We should be within range. Alright, and our next constraint is 8,700, so spin it down to that. And as we enter the IMC, keep our eye on that, and let's slow to 200. Well, that's as slow as we're going to get because we are idled and still coming down at a nice clip. Oh, look at that. Look at that. What a day. Feed in a little bit of power. Our next constraint is Jezzy at 8,700, and we can probably have to slow down quite a bit to do that, so let's put in our first notch of flaps. Power back. Check and see why our approach isn't arming. Do a direct to Jezzy, which is 10, Well, it's not going to give us our approach, so we'll follow the profile, and we will count on being visual by the time we get there. And we'll sort it out on the ground. I think it has to do with the fact that I edited the flight plan. I put an intermediate point right here, and that probably threw it off. Alright, so here we go. We're over the lake. There is no terrain. Our decision height is 900 radio, or about 7,100 feet. We will make that, I think, with ease. We will now proceed to drop our gear, configure fully, and fly the airplane. In come the rest of our flaps. And we'll begin to bring in a little bit of power. I can see the pappies off in the distance, so that is good. And we're getting some bumpies. Let us put in our HUD and zoom on up to it. Retrim. Put our little power up here. And there's our runway. And we are on profile. I'm just going to slow us down a little bit. And we've got a bit of a crosswind from the right. So when we turn final here, you see how this is a kinked approach? We will just do this. And we will lose our HUD. And go back to a normal view, I guess you'd call it. Feed in a little bit of power as we bring up the nose. Put our flight director to standby. We don't need it anymore. 1,000. Okay, we're in beautiful shape. My VAP actually with the wind is going to be right about there, right where it is right now. Don't really want to get much more than that. See how the nose is up about 4 degrees, and actually we want enough power so it's very slightly down, like there. That's about right. And we really are getting just a little bit of a buffeting here, coming down from those hills probably. And you see how the crosswind is pushing us just a little bit off to the left? So we'll just turn into it. 500. And now I'm just going to go downhill here with a little bit less power than I normally would. And I'm now, see how I've got a little bit of a crab going? And I'm actually going to need to put in more of a crab.
Plus 100.
Now a little bit less, take it out.
Minimums. Minimums.
And we are landing.
100.
Walk my
50.
trim up.
40. 30. 20.
Out comes the
10.
crab. And welcome to Lake Tahoe. ...129 feet per minute. I'll take it. We're going to roll to the end here because I want to take a look at these mountains for another second or two longer. God, that is beautiful. Look at the clouds just creeping down over the ridges. and the distance effect. That's pretty beautiful. All right, well look, it's a long taxi back, but this was the beginning of a journey, and I want your feedback, your input on where to fly. I think we're going to fly next to another Orbix airport, which is Vail, K-E-G-E, Eagle County. And from there, we'll probably head out to someplace like, I don't know, I'm thinking Omaha or somewhere around there, and probably from there either Kansas City or St. Louis. And in the meantime, thanks once again to everyone who subscribed, and thanks especially to some of the friends I've made here online, and all the kind words from everyone. I have to say that I've been putting up a lot of videos, and I like to bring you guys variety, but to tell you the truth, I'm pretty selfish. I just like flying this plane, and I like the places it can take me to. And at some point I'll probably fly a Comanche or maybe the Turbine Duke or something like that, but for the moment this is just so much sheer fun. Just the right level of complexity. I can't say enough good things about it. And it's a turboprop, and I'm pretty much a turboprop slut from childhood. So you know, it definitely pushes all my buttons. But in the meantime, you know, hit like if you liked it, send me your suggestions, subscribe if you want to see more, and we will see you again very shortly on our way further into the Rockies to Vail, Colorado. So, till then, have a good weekend, and see you next time.